The jungle was alive with sounds. Insects chirped in rhythmic patterns. Leaves rustled as unseen creatures moved through the underbrush, and the distant call of birds echoed faintly through the humid air. It was a place teeming with life, yet there was an eerie stillness beneath it all, a feeling that something dangerous lurked just beyond sight. Ryan Carter adjusted the strap of his toolkit on his shoulder and took a deep breath. The damp air filled his lungs, heavy with the scent of moss and wet earth. Ryan wasn't new to missions like this. As a technician for the Interstellar Exploration Corps, he had been sent to repair malfunctioning equipment on dozens of planets and moons. But this time felt different. This moon, Epsilon 7, was unlike any other he'd visited before. Its surface was covered almost entirely by dense forests, and its skies were perpetually shrouded in thick clouds that blocked out most sunlight. The only light came from glowing plants scattered across the ground, casting faint green and blue hues that made everything look surreal. His task was simple enough. Fix an ancient alien artifact buried deep within the jungle. The device had been discovered decades ago during one of humanity's first expeditions to the region, but no one knew exactly what it did. Some scientists believed it might have been some kind of communication tool, while others thought it could be a weapon or even a portal to another dimension. Whatever it was, it had stopped working recently, and Ryan's job was to get it running again. But getting to the artifact wouldn't be easy. The coordinates led straight into the heart of the jungle, where the terrain was treacherous and the wildlife unpredictable. Ryan glanced at his wrist-mounted map screen, which displayed a blinking red dot marking his destination. He estimated it would take at least 2 hours to reach the site if he kept moving steadily. With a sigh, he tightened his grip on his toolkit and stepped forward. The path ahead was narrow and overgrown, forcing Ryan to duck under low-hanging vines and step carefully over roots that twisted across the ground like gnarled fingers. Every few minutes he paused to check his surroundings, scanning for signs of danger. So far, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, just the usual noises of the jungle. Still, he couldn't shake the sense that he was being watched. As he walked, Ryan's mind wandered back to the briefing he'd received before leaving the colony station orbiting Epsilon 7. Commander Lewis had warned him about the risks of venturing too far into the jungle. "Stay alert," she had said. "This isn't just uncharted territory, it's hostile territory. There are predators out here that could tear you apart without a second thought." She hadn't elaborated further, but her tone had been serious, enough to make Ryan take extra precautions. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small handheld energy shield. It wasn't much, just a palm-sized device that emitted a weak protective barrier, but it was better than nothing. Ryan activated it briefly, watching as a shimmering blue field surrounded him for a moment before fading away. Satisfied that it was working properly, he slipped it back into his pocket and continued onward. By the time he reached a clearing halfway to his destination, the sun, or rather, whatever dim light managed to filter through the clouds, was beginning to set. Shadows lengthened around him, and the temperature dropped noticeably. Ryan decided to stop for a quick break, setting down his toolkit and pulling out a ration bar from his pack. He chewed slowly, listening intently to the sounds of the jungle. Something didn't feel right. At first it was subtle, a faint rustling in the bushes nearby, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps padding softly against the damp soil. Ryan froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the energy shield. His eyes darted toward the source of the noise, trying to pierce through the darkness. For a moment there was silence. Then, suddenly, a pair of glowing yellow eyes appeared between the trees. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. The creature stepped into view, revealing itself fully. It was massive, larger than any animal he'd ever seen, with sleek black fur that blended seamlessly into the shadows. Its body was lean and muscular, built for speed and power. Long claws extended from its paws, glinting faintly in the dim light. Most striking of all were its eyes, which burned with an intensity that sent chills down Ryan's spine. It was Zekthar, though Ryan didn't know its name yet. All he knew was that this was no ordinary predator. This was something engineered, not born. Every movement it made was deliberate, calculated. It crouched low to the ground, its tail flicking behind it as it studied Ryan with predatory focus. For a split second, Ryan considered running, but he quickly realized that would be futile. This thing could outrun him easily. Instead, he forced himself to stay calm, keeping his gaze locked onto the creature's eyes. Slowly, he raised his hands to show he wasn't armed. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "I'm not here to hurt you." Zekthar didn't respond, at least not in a way Ryan could understand. It let out a low growl, the sound reverberating through the clearing like thunder. Ryan's fingers twitched toward his toolkit, searching for anything that might give him an edge. That's when inspiration struck. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a small diagnostic scanner he'd brought along for the mission. It was a basic piece of equipment, designed to analyze machinery, but it emitted a soft humming noise when turned on. Ryan held it up cautiously, activating it so that the hum grew louder. To his surprise, Zekthar tilted its head, its ears swiveling toward the sound. The growling ceased, replaced by a curious expression. Encouraged, Ryan took a step closer, holding the scanner out like an offering. Zekthar sniffed the air, its nostrils flaring as it processed the strange vibrations emanating from the device. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, to Ryan's astonishment, the creature lowered its head slightly, almost as if bowing. Ryan's mind raced. Was this a trick? A trap? Or was Zekthar actually interested in him? He didn't have time to think it through. Taking a gamble, he knelt down and placed the scanner on the ground between them. Zekthar hesitated, then cautiously approached, nudging the device with its nose before looking back at Ryan. That's when it happened. Zekthar turned its side toward Ryan and lowered its massive body, presenting its back as if inviting him to climb aboard. Ryan stared at the creature in disbelief. Was this really happening? Could he trust it? There was no time to second-guess himself. If Zekthar wanted to attack, it could have done so already. And if this was his only chance to survive, he had to take it. With trembling hands, Ryan climbed onto the creature's back, gripping tightly to its fur. Zekthar let out a low rumble that vibrated through Ryan's entire body, then surged forward with incredible speed. The jungle blurred past as Zekthar bounded through the trees, leaping over obstacles with ease. Ryan clung on for dear life, his heart pounding in his chest. Wherever they were going, one thing was certain. His mission and his life had just taken a turn he never could have anticipated. The ride on Zekthar's back was unlike anything Ryan had ever experienced. The massive predator moved with a grace and speed that defied logic, weaving through the jungle as though it were gliding over water. Trees loomed up ahead, only to blur, past in an instant as Zekthar leapt over roots, rocks, and fallen branches without slowing down. Ryan held on tightly, his fingers buried deep in the creature's thick fur, his legs gripping its sides for dear life. At first, all he could focus on was survival. Every jump sent his stomach lurching, and every twist of the creature's body threatened to throw him off. But after a while, Ryan began to notice something else. Zekthar wasn't just running aimlessly. It seemed to know exactly where it was going. The path they followed was deliberate, avoiding obstacles and choosing routes that led them deeper into the jungle. Ryan couldn't help but marvel at how intelligent this creature was. It wasn't just a mindless beast. It was calculating, purposeful. As they traveled, Ryan's fear slowly gave way to curiosity. He glanced around, taking in the sights of the jungle from this new vantage point. From high atop Zekthar's back, the world looked different. The glowing plants below created rivers of light that snaked through the darkness, illuminating patches of the forest floor. Strange creatures darted out of their way, disappearing into the shadows as Zekthar passed by. The air smelled fresher up here, less heavy than it had been when he was trudging along the ground. But even as Ryan started to relax, questions swirled in his mind. Why had Zekthar spared him? What did it want? And where was it taking him? These thoughts kept circling back unanswered as they raced onward. Ryan tried to push them aside, focusing instead on staying balanced and holding on. He didn't dare let go, not yet. After what felt like hours, but was probably closer to 30 minutes, the jungle began to thin out. The trees grew farther apart, and the ground became flatter. Zekthar slowed its pace, finally coming to a stop in a large clearing bathed in pale moonlight. Ryan slid off its back, landing awkwardly on the soft grass. His legs wobbled beneath him, still unsteady from the wild ride. For a moment, he simply stood there, catching his breath and trying to process everything that had happened. Zekthar turned to face him, its glowing eyes studying him intently. Ryan took a cautious step backward, unsure of what to do next. Was this the end of the journey? Had Zekthar brought him here to finish the job? But the creature made no move to attack. Instead, it lowered itself onto its haunches, sitting patiently as if waiting for something. Ryan looked around the clearing, searching for clues. At first glance, it seemed ordinary enough. A wide-open space surrounded by trees, with nothing particularly remarkable about it. But then he noticed something strange. Scattered across the ground were odd shapes rising slightly above the surface like the tips of submerged stones. They were covered in moss and vines, nearly blending into the surroundings, but Ryan could see faint outlines beneath the greenery. He stepped closer, brushing away some of the foliage with his hand. What he uncovered took his breath away. Beneath the layers of plant life were structures, smooth metallic surfaces etched with intricate patterns that glowed faintly in the dim light. They weren't natural formations, they were man-made, or rather alien-made. Ryan crouched down, running his fingers over the cool metal. It felt ancient, worn down by time, but there was no mistaking its advanced design. Whoever, or whatever, had built this place possessed technology far beyond anything humanity had achieved. Ryan's mind raced with possibilities. Could this be connected to the artifact he'd been sent to repair? Was this why Zekthar had brought him here? He glanced back at the creature, who was still watching him silently. "Did you know about this?" he asked aloud, knowing full well that Zekthar wouldn't understand him. Still, it felt good to break the silence. He spent the next hour exploring the clearing, uncovering more of the hidden structures. Some were small, no larger than a chair, while others were much bigger, resembling slabs or platforms. One particularly large piece caught his attention, a circular platform with symbols carved into its surface. When Ryan touched it, the symbols lit up briefly, pulsing with a soft blue light before fading again. It was clear that these objects were part of some kind of system, though their exact purpose remained a mystery. As Ryan worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that Zekthar was helping him, not physically but in other ways. The creature stayed close by, occasionally nudging him towards certain areas or making low rumbling sounds when he approached something interesting. It was almost as if Zekthar understood what Ryan was doing, and approved of it. By the time he finished his initial survey, Ryan was exhausted but exhilarated. He sat down on one of the smaller structures, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Okay," he said to himself. "So now what?" He knew he needed to figure out what these ruins meant and how they connected to the artifact. But he also knew he couldn't do it alone. He needed tools, equipment, maybe even backup. Yet the thought of leaving Zekthar behind didn't sit right with him. There was something special about this creature, something worth protecting. Before he could think too deeply about it, a sound broke the quiet of the clearing. It was distant at first, barely audible over the rustling leaves, but it grew louder quickly. Footsteps, many of them crunching through the underbrush. Ryan's heart sank. He recognized the rhythm immediately. Soldiers, or worse, aliens. Zekthar reacted instantly, standing up and letting out a low growl. Its ears flattened against its head, and its tail twitched nervously. Ryan grabbed his toolkit and stood beside the creature, scanning the tree line for movement. Shadows moved between the trunks, closing in on the clearing. Whoever or whatever they weren't friendly. Ryan's mind raced. If these were human troops, they might shoot first and ask questions later, especially if they saw Zekthar. And if they were aliens, well, he didn't want to think about that. Either way, staying put wasn't an option. He turned to Zekthar, placing a hand on its side. "We need to go," he whispered urgently. Can you get us out of here? Zekthar didn't hesitate. With a powerful leap, it bounded toward the edge of the clearing, heading straight for the densest part of the jungle. Ryan scrambled onto its back once more, clinging tightly as they disappeared into the shadows. Behind them, shouts echoed through the night, growing fainter as they put distance between themselves and their pursuers. For now, they were safe. But Ryan knew this was only the beginning. Whatever secrets lay hidden in those ruins and whatever connection Zekthar had to them, they were bound to draw more attention, and Ryan had no idea whether he was ready for what came next. The jungle welcomed them back with its usual symphony of sounds, leaves rustling, insects chirping, and the occasional distant call of an unseen creature. But this time, Ryan didn't feel comforted by it. His heart was still racing from their narrow escape, and every snap of a twig or rustle in the bushes made him flinch. Zekthar, however, seemed completely at ease. The big cat moved silently through the undergrowth, weaving between trees with practiced precision. Its glowing eyes scanned the darkness ahead, alert for any signs of danger. Ryan clung to Zekthar's back, his body sore from the constant jolting and bouncing as they sped through the forest. Despite the discomfort, he couldn't help but marvel at how effortlessly the creature navigated the terrain. It was as if Zekthar had been born to do this, to run through the wilds with purpose, carrying someone, or something, towards safety. Ryan wondered briefly if this was what Zekthar had been bred for. Was it truly just a predator, or was there more to its existence? The thought lingered in his mind as they pressed onward. After what felt like hours, Zekthar finally slowed down. They emerged into another clearing, smaller than the one they'd left behind but equally mysterious. This area was dominated by a rocky outcrop that rose sharply from the ground, its surface dotted with strange carvings. Ryan slid off Zekthar's back, landing awkwardly on the uneven ground. He winced as his feet hit the soil, his muscles protesting after the long ride. For a moment he simply stood there, leaning against the creature's side while he caught his breath. Zekthar let out a soft rumble, nudging Ryan gently with its head. The gesture surprised him. It almost felt like encouragement. Ryan patted the creature's neck, feeling a strange warmth spread through his chest. "Thanks," he muttered, though he wasn't sure why. Maybe it was gratitude for saving his life, or maybe it was something deeper, a growing bond between two beings who should have been enemies. Pushing those thoughts aside, Ryan turned his attention to the rock formation. The carvings etched into its surface were unlike anything he'd ever seen before. They weren't random scratches or crude drawings. They were intricate patterns that spiraled and looped, forming shapes that seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. Ryan reached out, running his fingers over the grooves. The stone was cold beneath his touch, but there was something else. A faint vibration, almost imperceptible, humming softly under his fingertips. "What is this place?" Ryan whispered, half to himself and half to Zekthar. The creature didn't respond, of course, but it stepped closer, sniffing at the rocks curiously. Ryan pulled out his diagnostic scanner again, the same device he'd used earlier to calm Zekthar during their first encounter. He activated it, pointing it toward the carvings. The screen lit up immediately, displaying streams of data that scrolled too quickly for Ryan to read. Whatever these markings were, they weren't natural. They were artificial, created by intelligent hands. Ryan frowned, studying the readings carefully. The scanner detected traces of energy emanating from the carvings, similar to the faint glow he'd noticed earlier. It reminded him of the artifact he'd been sent to repair, the one buried deep in the jungle. But there was something different about this energy. It felt older, more refined, as though it had been honed over centuries of use. Ryan's curiosity deepened. Could these ruins be connected to the artifact? And if so, how? As he worked, Ryan became increasingly aware of Zekthar's presence. The creature stayed close, watching him intently as he examined the rocks. Occasionally it would nudge him toward certain sections of the carving as if guiding him. Ryan followed its lead, trusting the instinct that told him Zekthar knew more than it could communicate. Sure enough, when he focused on the areas Zekthar highlighted, the scanner picked up stronger energy signatures. It was almost as if the creature was helping him piece together a puzzle. By the time Ryan finished his initial analysis, dawn was breaking. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the clouds, casting pale beams of light across the clearing. Ryan sat back on his heels, rubbing his temples. His head was spinning with questions, theories, and possibilities. These ruins were clearly important, too important to ignore. But he had no idea where to start unraveling their secrets. All he knew was that he needed to figure out what they meant, and fast. Whoever, or whatever, had been chasing them earlier wouldn't give up easily. Just then, Zekthar let out a low growl. Ryan looked up sharply, scanning the tree line. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Then, movement caught his eye. A shadow darting between the trunks, too quick to identify. Another followed, then another. Ryan's stomach tightened. They were being surrounded. Great, he muttered under his breath. He grabbed his toolkit and scrambled to his feet, positioning himself beside Zekthar. The big cat crouched low, its tail flicking nervously as it prepared to defend itself. And him. Ryan glanced around, trying to gauge their chances. There were too many shadows moving in the trees to count. If they attacked all at once, even Zekthar wouldn't be able to protect them both. But instead of charging forward, the figures stopped at the edge of the clearing. They remained hidden among the foliage, their outlines barely visible in the dim light. Ryan squinted, straining to make out details. They were humanoid, taller than humans, with elongated limbs and slender frames, but their faces were obscured by masks or helmets. Their weapons glinted menacingly in the morning light. One of them stepped forward, raising a hand in a gesture that might have been meant to signal peace or dominance. Ryan tensed, gripping the energy shield tightly in his hand. He didn't trust them, not for a second, but he also knew that attacking blindly would only get them killed. He had to wait to see what they wanted. The figure spoke, its voice distorted by some kind of translator device. "You trespass on sacred ground," it said, the words coming out haltingly, as if the speaker struggled to find the right phrases. "Leave now or face consequences." Ryan swallowed hard. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he replied, keeping his tone calm despite the fear bubbling inside him. "I'm just trying to understand this place and why your pet brought me here." He gestured toward Zekthar, hoping the mention of the creature would spark recognition. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if considering his words. Then, without warning, it raised its weapon, aiming directly at Ryan. Zekthar reacted instantly, lunging forward with a roar that shook the ground. Ryan stumbled backward, raising the energy shield just in time to block a bolt of energy fired from the alien's weapon. The impact sent him sprawling, but he managed to roll to his feet, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Chaos erupted. More aliens emerged from the trees, firing rapidly. Zekthar charged into the fray, swiping at attackers with its massive claws and dodging blasts with incredible agility. Ryan ducked behind the rocky outcrop, clutching his toolkit like a lifeline. He knew he couldn't fight, not against armed opponents, but he couldn't leave Zekthar to face them alone either. Desperate, Ryan scanned the clearing for anything he could use to turn the tide. His eyes landed on the carvings etched into the rock. Earlier, the scanner had detected energy emanating from them. What if he could harness that power somehow? It was a long shot, but it was all he had. Grabbing a small multi-tool from his kit, Ryan began working feverishly at the base of the rock formation. Sparks flew as he rewired circuits and rerouted energy flows, channeling the faint hum of power into something stronger. Behind him, Zekthar roared again, the sound mingling with the crackle of energy weapons and shouts of the attackers. Ryan ignored it all, focusing solely on his task. Finally, with a loud click, the system activated. A pulse of energy surged outward from the carvings, rippling through the air like a shockwave. The aliens froze, their weapons faltering as the pulse disrupted their systems. Some dropped to their knees, clutching their heads, while others staggered, backward, retreating into the trees. Ryan slumped against the rock, breathing heavily. His hands trembled as he stared at what he'd done. The clearing was eerily quiet now, save for the heavy panting of Zekthar beside him. The big cat nuzzled. him gently as if to say, "Well done." For a moment, Ryan allowed himself to relax. They were safe, for now. But he knew this victory wouldn't last long. Whoever these aliens were, they wouldn't give up easily. And sooner or later, Ryan would have to confront them again. Until then, he had work to do. Together, he and Zekthar would uncover the secrets of this place and maybe, just maybe, find a way to survive whatever came next. The silence after the pulse of energy was almost deafening. Ryan sat on the ground, his back pressed against the rocky outcrop, trying to steady his breathing. His hands were still shaking, and his mind raced with a mix of relief and disbelief. He had no idea how he'd managed to trigger the energy surge from the carvings, but it had worked, just barely. The aliens were gone, retreating into the jungle like shadows dissolving into darkness. But Ryan knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Zekthar stood nearby, its chest rising and falling rapidly as it recovered from the fight. Its fur was singed in places where energy bolts had grazed it, but otherwise the creature seemed unharmed. Ryan looked at the big cat, feeling a strange sense of gratitude. "You saved me," he said softly, though he doubted Zekthar understood him. Still, the words felt important to say. Without Zekthar's strength and speed, Ryan wouldn't have stood a chance against those attackers. For a moment, neither of them moved. The clearing was eerily calm, the usual sounds of the jungle muted, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Ryan took the opportunity to assess their situation. His toolkit was scattered across the ground, some of the tools damaged or missing entirely. His energy shield was cracked, its protective field flickering weakly when he tested it. Worst of all, his scanner, the device he'd used earlier to analyze the ruins, was completely dead. Whatever power surge he'd unleashed must have fried its circuits. Ryan sighed and leaned his head back against the rock. He needed to figure out what to do next, but his thoughts were jumbled. Who were those aliens? Why had they attacked? And most importantly, why did they care about these ruins? Ryan glanced at the carvings again, their faint glow now dimmer than before. They held answers, he was sure of it, but without his tools he couldn't decipher them further. As if sensing his frustration, Zekthar nudged him gently with its massive head. Ryan smiled faintly, patting the creature's side. "Guess we're stuck together for now," he murmured. Zekthar let out a low rumble that sounded almost like agreement. Ryan chuckled despite himself. It was funny in a way. A few hours ago he'd been running for his life from this very creature. Now it felt like his only ally. Over the next hour, Ryan focused on gathering his remaining tools and repairing what he could. He salvaged parts from the broken scanner, using them to rig a makeshift diagnostic device. It wasn't perfect, but it would have to do. When he activated it near the carvings, the screen flickered to life, displaying fragmented images and symbols. Some of the patterns matched those etched into the rocks, while others were unfamiliar. Ryan frowned, scrolling through the data slowly. There was something here, a message, maybe even instructions, but it was buried beneath layers of corruption. Zekthar watched him intently, occasionally brushing against his arm as if urging him to keep going. Ryan found himself talking aloud, explaining his process as he worked. "These symbols, they look like coordinates," he said, pointing to a series of lines and dots on the screen. "Maybe directions, or maybe a map." He paused, glancing at Zekthar. "Do you know what this means?" Of course, the big cat didn't answer, but its persistent presence gave Ryan the motivation to keep trying. After another 20 minutes of tinkering, he managed to isolate one sequence of symbols. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give him an idea of where to go next. According to the readings, there was another site, a larger structure, located deeper within the jungle. If Ryan could reach it, he might be able to uncover more information about the ruins and their purpose. The journey to the second site was grueling. The jungle seemed to grow denser with every step, the trees towering higher and the underbrush thicker. Zekthar led the way, bounding effortlessly through the obstacles while Ryan trudged along behind, hacking at vines with a utility knife. The air was humid and oppressive, making each breath feel heavy. Sweat dripped down Ryan's face, stinging his eyes, but he pushed forward, driven by determination. As they traveled, Ryan noticed subtle changes in the environment. The glowing plants became brighter, their light casting eerie shadows on the forest floor. Strange noises echoed around them, low hums and clicks that didn't seem natural. At one point, Ryan swore he saw movement in the corner of his vision, but when he turned to look, there was nothing there. It was unnerving, but he tried to ignore it, focusing instead on keeping up with Zekthar. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached their destination. The second site was unlike anything Ryan had seen so far. Instead of scattered ruins, this area contained a single massive structure, a towering spire made of the same metallic material as the carvings. Its surface shimmered faintly, reflecting the dim light in mesmerizing patterns. Ryan approached cautiously, his heart pounding with a mix of awe and apprehension. The base of the spire was covered in intricate designs, similar to the ones he'd studied earlier but far more complex. As Ryan examined them, he realized they weren't just decorative, they formed a kind of interface. Panels along the bottom of the spire lit up when he touched them, responding to his movements. It was clear that this was no ordinary monument, it was a machine. Zekthar stepped closer, sniffing at the spire curiously. Ryan hesitated, unsure whether activating the structure was a good idea. What if it triggered another attack, or worse, something uncontrollable? But he didn't have much choice. If he wanted answers, he needed to take the risk. Taking a deep breath, Ryan placed his hands on the glowing panels and pressed firmly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft the spire began to change. Sections of its surface shifted and realigned, revealing hidden mechanisms beneath. Lights pulsed rhythmically, growing brighter with each passing second. Suddenly, a holographic projection sprang to life above the spire, displaying a swirling galaxy filled with stars and planets. Ryan stared in amazement. The projection showed a vast network of interconnected worlds, each marked by symbols that matched those on the ruins. It was a map, not just of this moon, but of the entire galaxy. Ryan's mind reeled. Could this be the key to understanding the artifact he'd been sent to repair? And if so, what did it mean for humanity? Before he could think too deeply about it, a voice interrupted his thoughts. It came from behind him, low and commanding. Step away from the spire. Ryan spun around, his heart skipping a beat. Standing at the edge of the clearing were two figures, one male, one female, dressed in sleek armor adorned with ornate designs. Their faces were partially obscured by masks, but their eyes glowed faintly, giving them an otherworldly appearance. They carried weapons, but they didn't raise them immediately. Instead, they regarded Ryan and Zekthar with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "You are not supposed to be here," the woman said, her tone cold yet measured. She spoke in halting English, her words filtered through a translator. "This place is forbidden." Ryan raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he replied, his voice steady despite the fear bubbling inside him. "I'm just trying to understand what this is, and why. Your people keep attacking me." The man stepped forward, his weapon trained on Ryan. "Our people? You misunderstand. We are not like them." He gestured toward the jungle as if referring to the aliens who had chased them earlier. "We protect this place, and you..." He paused, studying Ryan carefully. "You should not exist here." Ryan frowned, confused. "What does that mean?" The woman exchanged a glance with her companion before answering. "This spire holds knowledge meant for those who came before us. It is not for humans or anyone else to tamper with." Her gaze shifted to Zekthar, lingering for a moment. "Even your companion was created by those who sought to control such power. Do you truly believe you can handle it?" Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He didn't know what to say. Everything they told him sounded impossible, yet the evidence was right in front of him. The ruins, the spire, the map. It all pointed to a civilization far older and more advanced than humanity. And somehow, Zekthar was connected to it. For a long moment, nobody moved. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Ryan lowered his hands and took a step back. "I don't want to hurt anyone," he said quietly, "but I can't leave until I understand what's going on here. If you know something, anything, you need to tell me." The two strangers exchanged another glance, their expressions unreadable. Then, without warning, the man lowered his weapon slightly. "Very well," he said. "But know this, the truth may be more than you can bear." With that cryptic statement, the pair stepped aside, allowing Ryan and Zekthar to approach the spire once more. Ryan hesitated, unsure whether to trust them, but he had come too far to turn back now. Taking a deep breath, he turned back to the holographic map and began searching for answers that would change everything he thought he knew about the universe. The holographic map floated above the spire, its swirling galaxy casting soft light across the clearing. Ryan stood transfixed, his eyes darting from one glowing symbol to another. Each star seemed connected by faint lines, forming a web of pathways that stretched across unimaginable distances. It was beautiful and overwhelming. Ryan couldn't help but feel small, like a speck of dust staring into the infinite expanse of the universe. Zekthar sat nearby, watching him intently. The big cat's ears twitched at every sound, its body tense and ready to spring into action if needed. Ryan glanced at the creature occasionally, drawing strength from its presence. Whatever happened next, he knew Zekthar would be by his side. Two strangers remained at the edge of the clearing, their weapons lowered but still close at hand. They watched silently, their glowing eyes fixed on Ryan as though waiting for him to make a mistake. Ryan tried to ignore them, focusing instead on deciphering the map. He pointed his makeshift scanner at the projection, hoping it could translate some of the symbols. To his relief, the device flickered to life, displaying fragmented text alongside certain stars and planets. One sequence caught his attention, a series of symbols clustered around a bright star near the center of the galaxy. The scanner identified it as Keltha, a name Ryan didn't recognize. Beneath the name was a note, "Origin Point." Ryan frowned, tapping the screen to bring up more details. According to the data, Keltha wasn't just a location, it was the birthplace of the civilization that had built the ruins, the spire, and possibly even Zekthar itself. "This is where it all began," Ryan muttered aloud, tracing the glowing lines with his finger. "But what does it mean? Why are these ruins here on this moon?" The woman stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Keltha was once home to a great people, our ancestors. They mastered technologies beyond your comprehension, including ways to travel between stars without ships or engines. But their power came at a cost." Ryan turned to face her, his curiosity piqued. "What kind of cost?" The man answered this time, his tone grim. "They sought to control forces they did not fully understand. Their experiments created rifts in space and time, tears that threatened to destroy everything. In the end, they vanished, leaving behind only fragments of their work." Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. "And Zekthar? Is it part of that legacy?" The woman nodded slowly. "Yes. Creatures like it were engineered to serve as vessels, tools designed to carry beings across vast distances. But when their creators fell, many of these creations were abandoned. Some survived, adapting to new environments. Others..." She hesitated, glancing at Zekthar. "Others retained traces of their original purpose, though they no longer remember." Ryan looked at Zekthar, his mind racing. So this magnificent creature wasn't just a predator. It was something far more complex. A living remnant of an ancient civilization, carrying within it secrets that spanned galaxies. No wonder it had reacted so strangely to the ruins and the spire. It wasn't curiosity. It was instinct, buried deep beneath layers of evolution and survival. "But why am I here?" Ryan asked, turning back to the strangers. "Why did Zekthar bring me to this place? What do you want from me?" The man crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. We do not know why the creature chose you. Perhaps it sensed something in you, a spark of potential. Or perhaps it simply acted on instinct. As for us, he paused, choosing his words carefully. We are guardians, tasked with protecting the remnants of our ancestors' work. We cannot allow outsiders to tamper with it, not unless they prove themselves worthy. Ryan clenched his fists, frustration bubbling inside him. I'm not trying to tamper with anything, I'm just trying to survive, and maybe learn something along the way. If you're so worried about outsiders messing things up, why don't you explain what's going on instead of threatening me? The woman tilted her head slightly, considering his words. After a moment, she gestured toward the spire. Very well. Look closer at the map. You will find answers there, if you have the courage to seek them. Ryan hesitated, unsure whether to trust her. But he had come too far to turn back now. Taking a deep breath, he returned his focus to the holographic projection. He zoomed in on Keltha, studying the surrounding symbols. One stood out, a circular emblem marked with intricate patterns. When he touched it, the map shifted, zooming in further until a specific planet appeared. Its surface shimmered faintly, covered in strange structures that resembled the ruins he'd seen earlier. This is another site? Ryan asked, glancing at the strangers. It is, the woman confirmed. A gateway. From there you may begin to uncover the truth, but beware. The path ahead is dangerous. Many who seek knowledge of Keltha never return. Ryan swallowed hard, his heart pounding. He didn't know whether to believe her warning or dismiss it as intimidation. Either way, he couldn't ignore the pull he felt toward the map. Something about it called to him, urging him to take the next step. Turning to Zekthar, Ryan knelt beside the creature, placing a hand on its side. What do you think, big guy? Should we go check it out? Zekthar let out a low rumble, standing up and stepping closer to the spire. It stared at the projection for a moment before turning its gaze toward Ryan. The message was clear. Yes. Ryan straightened, determination replacing his fear. All right, he said, addressing the strangers. If you're serious about protecting this stuff, then guide me. Help me get to that gateway safely. The man and woman exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable. Finally, the woman nodded. We will escort you, but only because the spire has deemed you worthy. Do not test our patience. With that, the group set off, following the map's directions deeper into the jungle. The journey was long and arduous, the terrain growing increasingly treacherous as they neared their destination. Massive roots twisted across the ground, forcing them to climb over or crawl beneath. Dense thickets blocked their path, requiring Ryan to use his utility knife to hack through the vegetation. Through it all, Zekthar led the way, its powerful body clearing obstacles with ease. As they traveled, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Shadows moved between the trees, fleeting glimpses of movement that vanished whenever he looked directly at them. He mentioned it to the strangers, but they dismissed his concerns. The forest is alive, the man said cryptically. It sees all. Eventually they reached a massive wall of vines that stretched high into the canopy. Behind it, Ryan could hear the sound of rushing water. The woman raised a hand, signaling for the group to stop. Beyond this point lies the gateway, she said. Prepare yourself. Ryan nodded, gripping his toolkit tightly. With Zekthar at his side, he pushed through the vines, emerging into a breathtaking sight. Before him stood a towering structure made entirely of the same metallic material as the ruins and the spire. Its surface shimmered with iridescent colors, reflecting the dim light in mesmerizing patterns. At its base was a wide platform etched with glowing symbols, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. This is it, Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible over the roar of the nearby waterfall. The gateway. The strangers stepped forward, activating the platform with a wave of their hands. The symbols flared brighter, and a shimmering portal opened in the air above the structure. It rippled like liquid silver, revealing glimpses of stars and distant worlds beyond. Ryan stared at the portal, his mind racing. This was it, the moment of decision. On the other side lay answers, but also risks he couldn't begin to imagine. Turning to Zekthar, he placed a hand on the creature's side. "Ready for round 2? He asked with a nervous smile. Zekthar let out a low growl, stepping onto the platform without hesitation. Ryan followed, his heart pounding as the portal enveloped them in its radiant glow. Behind him, the strangers watched silently, their faces unreadable as the jungle fell silent. Once more. For better or worse, Ryan and Zekthar were about to leave Epsilon 7 behind and step into the unknown reaches of the galaxy. The sensation of passing through the portal was unlike anything Ryan had ever experienced. It felt as though he were being stretched and compressed at the same time, his body caught in a current of light and energy that pulled him forward relentlessly. Colors swirled around him, blues, greens, golds, all blending together in a kaleidoscope of motion. He couldn't tell if he was falling, flying, or simply floating. Beside him, Zekthar roared, its massive form shimmering faintly as it too was carried along by the strange forces of the gateway. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the journey ended. Ryan stumbled out of the portal, landing hard on a metallic surface that hummed softly beneath his hands. His head spun, and for a moment all he could do was lie there, breathing deeply and trying to steady himself. Zekthar appeared beside him a second later, shaking itself like a dog after a swim. The big cat let out a low rumble, its glowing eyes scanning their new surroundings with sharp focus. When Ryan finally managed to sit up, he was struck by what he saw. They were no longer on Epsilon 7, or any planet for that matter. Instead, they stood aboard what appeared to be an enormous spaceship, drifting through the void of space. Its interior was vast, filled with towering structures and intricate designs that glowed faintly in shades of blue and silver. The air smelled clean and metallic, tinged with a faint electrical charge. Above them, a wide viewport revealed the endless expanse of stars stretching out in every direction. Ryan climbed to his feet, his legs wobbling slightly as he adjusted to the ship's artificial gravity. "Where are we?" he murmured, more to himself than to Zekthar. The big cat nudged him gently as if reminding him to stay alert. Ryan nodded, patting the creature's side. "Right, let's figure this out." As they explored, Ryan quickly realized that the ship wasn't just abandoned, it was ancient. Dust coated every surface and many of the control panels were dark, their power long since drained. But despite its age, the vessel still felt alive, humming softly with residual energy. Ryan ran his fingers over the walls, marveling at the craftsmanship. Whoever had built this ship possessed technology far beyond anything humanity had achieved, and yet, it bore unmistakable similarities to the ruins and spire on Epsilon 7. Zekthar seemed equally fascinated, sniffing at the walls and occasionally pawing at certain sections that emitted faint vibrations. Ryan followed the creature's lead, trusting its instincts. Sure enough, when he examined those areas more closely, he discovered hidden mechanisms. Control panels disguised as decorative patterns, access hatches concealed beneath layers of dust. With some effort, he managed to activate one of the panels, causing a section of the wall to slide open and reveal a glowing interface. "This must be the bridge," Ryan said aloud, stepping into the newly revealed chamber. The room was dominated by a large console surrounded by holographic displays. Most of the screens were blank, but a few flickered weakly, displaying fragmented images of star charts and navigation data. Ryan approached cautiously, pulling out his makeshift scanner to analyze the system. To his surprise, the device worked perfectly here, translating the alien symbols into something he could understand. According to the readings, the ship was called the Lumina, a vessel designed not only for travel but also for exploration and research. Its creators had used it to study distant worlds, mapping galaxies and collecting knowledge about the universe. But there was something else, a warning buried deep within the ship's logs. Ryan frowned as he read the text, his stomach tightening with unease. "The rifts," he whispered, scrolling through the information. "They're real." The logs described catastrophic events caused by experiments gone wrong, tears in space and time that destabilized entire star systems. Entire civilizations had vanished overnight, consumed by these rifts. The builders of the Lumina had been among the last survivors, fleeing their homeworld in hopes of finding a way to repair the damage, but their efforts had failed, leaving behind only fragments of their work, and ships like this one adrift in the void. Ryan sat back on his heels, overwhelmed by the weight of what he'd learned. This wasn't just a story from the past, it was a warning for the future. If humanity ever reached this level of technology without understanding its dangers, they could face the same fate as Kelta's people. And yet, here he was, standing, aboard a relic of that doomed civilization, holding pieces of knowledge that could change everything. Zekthar let out a low growl, drawing Ryan's attention. The big cat was staring at the viewport, its ears flattened against its head. Ryan turned to look, his breath catching in his throat. A fleet of ships had appeared in the distance, their sleek designs unmistakably alien. They were closing in, fast, their weapons glowing ominously as they prepared to attack. "Not again," Ryan muttered, scrambling to his feet. He glanced at Zekthar, who crouched low, ready to defend them. But even with the big cat's strength, they wouldn't stand a chance against an entire fleet. Ryan needed another plan. Desperation drove him back to the console. He scanned the controls frantically, searching for anything that might give them an edge. That's when he noticed a sequence of commands labeled Emergency Protocol. Without hesitation, he activated it. The ship shuddered violently as dormant systems roared to life. Lights blazed across the bridge, and the hum of engines filled the air. On the viewport, the approaching ships hesitated, clearly surprised by the sudden activation of the Lumina. Ryan didn't waste time questioning how or why the ship still worked. Instead, he focused on the controls, using his scanner to translate the alien commands. To his amazement, the interface responded to his touch, allowing him to pilot the vessel. With Zekthar watching protectively, Ryan guided the Lumina into a defensive position, raising its shields and powering up its weapons. The enemy fleet opened fire, bolts of energy slamming into the ship's barrier. Ryan gritted his teeth, keeping his hands steady on the controls. "Hang on," he shouted, to Zekthar, who roared in response. With a surge of adrenaline, Ryan maneuvered the ship, dodging attacks and returning fire with precision. The battle was chaotic, the viewport flashing with bursts of light as explosions lit up the darkness of space. Finally, after what felt like hours, the enemy ships began to retreat, their formation breaking apart as they fled. Ryan slumped back in his seat, his hands trembling as the tension drained from his body. Zekthar patted over, nuzzling him gently. Ryan laughed weakly, scratching the creature's ears. "We did it," he said, his voice hoarse. "We actually did it." But their victory came with consequences. As the adrenaline faded, Ryan realized they couldn't stay aboard the Lumina forever. The ship was old, its systems barely holding together. Sooner or later, they would need to find a safe harbor, or risk being stranded in the middle of nowhere. Before he could dwell on that problem, however, a transmission crackled through the ship's speakers. A voice spoke, filtered through a translator but clear enough to understand. "Human technician," it said, deep and resonant. "You have proven yourself resourceful. We will allow you safe passage, but only if you share your findings about Keltha." Ryan froze, recognizing the speaker immediately. It was Velra, the alien queen who had sent Zekthar to kill him in the first place. She must have tracked them through the portal. For a moment, Ryan considered refusing, but then he looked at Zekthar, who stood tall and proud beside him. This creature had saved his life more times than he could count, and now it was time to return the favor. Slowly, Ryan activated the communication system. "Fine," he said, his voice steady, "but I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for everyone, including Zekthar." Valra's response was curt. "Agreed. Meet us at the coordinates provided. Fail to comply, and we will destroy your ship." The transmission cut off, leaving Ryan alone with his thoughts. He glanced at Zekthar, who met his gaze with unwavering trust. Together they had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Ryan knew they could handle them, as long as they stayed side by side. With a deep breath, Ryan set course for the rendezvous point, steering the Lumina toward a future filled with uncertainty, but also possibility. For the first time in his life, Ryan felt truly alive, not just as a technician, but as an explorer, a survivor, and a friend to a creature unlike any other.